My father betrayed me after 12 years building his company, gave it all to my two-year-old nephew who knew nothing. But I quit, started my own business, and now he's begging because he went bankrupt and lost everything. I'm 34 years old. I work in real estate. Well, now I have my own real estate company. And what happened about a year and a half ago still has me processing everything. Though it doesn't hurt as much as it used to, I guess. The thing is, I spent 12 years, building my father's business from scratch practically, and he decided to hand everything over to my nephew, Kevin, a two-year-old kid who barely knew how to use Excel properly. But let me start from the beginning because this story has more layers than an onion, as they say. I grew up in a pretty traditional family. My father, David, was always a tough guy, one of those who believe that work is everything and that emotions are for the weak, you know, the type. He founded his real estate company when I was like 10 years old. And from when I was a kid, he put the idea in my head that someday all of that would be mine, that he was building something for the family, for me specifically. My mother, Susan, was always softer, but she never opposed my father on anything, so basically what he said was law in the house. I have a sister, Karen, who's 6 years older than me, and she was always Daddy's favorite. I don't know why, that's just how things were. She could do whatever she wanted, and Dad would always defend her. When I finished college, I studied business administration, obviously because that was the plan. I went straight to work with my father. I was like 22 years old, the same age Kevin is now. How ironic, right? But the difference is that I started from the bottom, literally. My father had me do everything: answer calls, file documents, accompany agents to show properties, clean offices if necessary. He told me I had to know the business from the ground up, that I couldn't be boss if I didn't know how every part of the company worked. And honestly, it makes sense, or it made sense at the time. I accepted it because I thought he was preparing me to eventually take control. Years passed, and I moved up the ranks. I learned everything about the real estate market, made contacts, closed big deals, helped expand the company to 3 different cities. By the time I'd been there like 8 years, I was practically managing daily operations, while my father focused more on the strategic part and meetings with investors. We were doing well. Really well, in fact. The company grew 200% in those years, and a big part was thanks to my efforts. I don't want to sound arrogant, but it's the truth. My father even acknowledged it. He'd tell me, "Samuel, son, this wouldn't be possible without you. I'm proud of what you've achieved." I felt validated, you know? I felt like all the effort was worth it. I married Angela like 9 years ago. She's amazing. She always supported me in everything and understood that I worked long hours because we were building our future, or so we both thought. She works in digital marketing and has her own successful career. So we didn't depend only on my income, but the idea was always that when I took over the company, we'd have financial stability for life. We could have kids without worries, travel, all those things people plan. Now, let's talk about Kevin. Kevin is my sister Karen's son. She had him when she was super young, like 20 years old, and my father basically supported her and the kid their whole lives. Karen never really worked. She always lived off Dad's money, and Kevin grew up being the favorite grandson. The only grandson, in fact, because Angela and I decided to wait to have kids until I took over the company. Kevin was a normal kid, I guess. A bit spoiled, but not terrible. He studied something related to business at a mediocre university. When he graduated like 3 years ago, my father gave him a position at the company, something in the marketing area or I don't know what. I didn't pay much attention because frankly I didn't think he had the skills to be there, but well, he was family, and my father wanted to give him a chance. Kevin worked little, arrived late, left early, spent half the day on his phone, basically did the minimum effort possible. I mentioned it to my father a couple times, but he'd tell me the kid was young and needed time to adapt, that I should be patient with him. I thought, well, he's his grandson. Obviously he's going to defend him, but eventually he'll have to mature or they'll have to fire him. I never imagined what would come next. Everything exploded at my father's 60th birthday party. It was a big event. He rented an elegant venue, invited like 200 people, important clients, employees, family, friends, everyone. I helped organize part of the party, even gave a speech about how proud I was of my father and everything we'd built together. We had a good time. The food was good. There was music. A typical celebration. Then came the moment when my father asked for attention to make an important announcement. I thought it was going to be something about expansion plans, or maybe something personal about his life. I don't know. My father started talking about how he'd built the company over 20 years ago, about legacy and family. And I was standing there smiling because I thought he was going to officially announce that I would be the next CEO, that finally, after 12 years of hard work, I was going to have what I'd been promised my whole life. But then he said, and that's why I've decided that the person who will lead this company in the future is someone young, with fresh ideas, someone who represents the new generation of our family. I'm proud to announce that my grandson, Kevin, will be the next CEO of the company. I swear the world stopped. I felt like someone had hit me in the stomach with a baseball bat. I looked around and everyone was clapping. Some looked surprised, but they clapped anyway. I couldn't move. I was literally frozen there, standing with a fake smile stuck on my face because I didn't want to make a scene in front of everyone. Angela grabbed my hand, and I felt it trembling. She was just as shocked as I was. Kevin was standing there with a huge smile, hugging my father, and my sister Karen was crying with happiness, like it was the happiest moment of her life, apparently. After the announcement, a bunch of people came to congratulate Kevin. Some looked at me with pity, others avoided my gaze completely. I stayed there like 20 more minutes, trying to process what had just happened, and then I told Angela we had to leave. She didn't even question it, just grabbed her purse, and we got out of there. In the car, we didn't talk. I was driving on autopilot, hands gripped on the steering wheel, trying not to explode. When we got home, I sat on the couch and I think I stayed there like 2 hours without saying anything. Angela hugged me and told me everything was going to be okay, that there was something we didn't know, that maybe my father had his reasons. But I knew there was no logical reason for this. It was simply that my father preferred his grandson over me, his own son who had given 12 years of his life to that company. And the next day, I called my father and told him I needed to talk to him. I went to his house. He was in his study, acting like nothing had happened. I asked him directly, why? Why Kevin and not me? What did I do wrong? My father looked at me and told me he'd made the decision thinking about the future of the company, that Kevin represented youth and new ideas, that I was very traditional in my way of doing business, and that the company needed to change with the times. I told him that was ridiculous, that Kevin didn't know anything about the business, that I had built everything with my own hands, that he had promised me my whole life that the company would be mine. My father got defensive and told me he'd never officially promised me anything, that I had assumed things, that the company was his and he could do whatever he wanted with it. I told him that Kevin was going to destroy everything in less than a year, that he didn't have the experience or maturity to handle a company that size. My father got angry and told me I was jealous, that I was immature for not being able to accept his decision, that if I really loved the family, I should support Kevin in this transition. I laughed, but it was a bitter laugh, like I can't believe what I'm hearing. I told him I was resigning, that I wasn't going to stay there watching him give away my work to someone who didn't deserve it. My father told me I was making a mistake, that I was going to regret it, but that if that was my decision, to do whatever I wanted. I left there and went straight to the office. It was Saturday, so there was nobody there. I went into my office, packed my personal things in boxes, photos with Angela, some diplomas, books, no company documents, obviously. I left my computer, my corporate phone, my keys, everything on the desk with a handwritten resignation letter. The letter basically said that after 12 years of dedicated service, I had decided to resign, effective immediately, and that I wished the company the best in its future. I didn't put anything emotional, nothing dramatic, just the facts. The next few weeks were horrible. I was unemployed, angry, resentful, depressed, all the emotions at the same time. Angela supported me incredibly. She told me this was an opportunity to do something on my own, that I had the talent and experience to start my own business. I wasn't convinced at first. I was afraid of failing, of not being able to compete with my father's company that was already established. But she insisted. She told me to stop giving him power over my life, to prove what I was capable of without his name or his resources. Meanwhile, I started hearing things about what was happening at the company. Kevin had officially assumed as CEO, and his first decisions were, let's say, interesting. He fired 3 of the oldest managers, people who had been working with my father from the beginning, because according to him, they didn't adapt to his modern vision of the company. These were guys with decades of experience, invaluable contacts, deep market knowledge, and Kevin simply fired them. He replaced one with a college friend who had no experience in real estate. The guy came from the tech sector or something like that. Then he implemented changes in internal processes that made no sense, like he wanted to digitize everything immediately without a proper plan. Spent a fortune on software nobody knew how to use, and that wasn't compatible with the systems we already had. The agents were confused, frustrated. Some started complaining openly. Kevin also tried to change the company's brand image, hired an expensive agency to redesign the logo and website. The result was something that looked generic and lost all the identity we'd built over the years. But the worst came like 4 months into his management. Kevin tried to close a big deal with an important client, a development company that wanted to invest in several commercial projects. To impress them, Kevin presented completely inflated financial projections, numbers that had no basis in reality. He basically lied about the company's capacity to handle projects of that size. The client signed based on that false information, and when the project started and they realized the company couldn't deliver on what was promised, they threatened to sue for fraud. My father had to intervene, hire lawyers, make under-the-table agreements to avoid a public lawsuit that would have completely destroyed the company's reputation. Even so, the news leaked in the industry, which is relatively small and everyone knows each other, and other clients started questioning whether they could trust the company. Some canceled contracts, others simply didn't renew when the time came. Employees also started leaving. First were the managers Kevin had fired. They obviously left resentfully, started working for the competition. Then some senior agents who didn't want to work under Kevin's leadership, they felt the company was losing its integrity and reputation. In 6 months, the company lost like 40% of its staff, including some of the best agents we had. During all this time, my family didn't contact me. My father didn't call me once. My mother didn't either. My sister even less. It was like I had ceased to exist for them because I hadn't accepted their decision. I stayed in touch with some ex-colleagues who had stayed at the company. They'd tell me what was happening, like the internal gossip, and it was a mix of satisfaction and sadness hearing how everything was falling apart, because on one hand I was right about Kevin, but on the other hand that company had been my life for 12 years and seeing it get destroyed wasn't pleasant. Then, like 8 months after my resignation, Angela and I were at home on a Sunday morning, having breakfast peacefully, when someone knocked on the door. I opened it and there were my parents, both of them, with serious faces. My father looked older than I remembered. He had dark circles. He'd lost weight. My mother was crying before I could say anything. I asked them what they wanted, with a pretty cold tone, honestly, and my father asked me if we could talk inside. I let them in, more than anything because I didn't want to make a scene outside where the neighbors could see, and we sat in the living room. Angela stayed with me. She wasn't going to leave me alone with them. My father started saying they'd made a mistake, that they had to admit they'd been wrong about Kevin, that the company was on the verge of collapse and they needed my help. My mother grabbed my hand and begged me to come back, to forgive my father, to save the company that was our family legacy. I stayed quiet for a moment, letting them process the fact that I wasn't going to immediately jump to help them. Then I asked them, "What about Kevin? What happens to him?" My father said Kevin would continue as CEO, but that I could have a high position, maybe coup or director of operations, where I could really handle the day-to-day while Kevin focused on strategic vision, which was obviously an excuse to say Kevin had no idea what to do, but they didn't want to admit it publicly. I told them, no. Simple and direct, no. My father was surprised. I think he really expected me to accept with gratitude or something. He asked me why not. What more did I want? They could pay me more, give me a better title, whatever. I told him it wasn't a matter of money or title, it was a matter of respect and dignity. They had shown me that after 12 years of hard work, I was worth nothing to them compared to an incompetent grandson, and now they wanted me to come back to clean up Kevin's mess and also keep working under him. like as his employee after everything I had built. My mother started crying harder, saying I was her son. How could I turn my back on the family in a time of need? I told her they had turned their backs on me first, that when I really needed them to recognize my work and my sacrifice, they chose Kevin. Angela intervened and told them very calmly but firmly that they needed to leave, to respect our decision and our home. My father stood up, pointed his finger at me, and told me I was selfish, that I was going to regret this decision, that when the company went bankrupt, it would be my fault for not helping. I laughed in his face, told him the company was going bankrupt because of his stupid decisions, not mine, and to live with the consequences. I walked them to the door and closed it behind them. Angela hugged me and told me I'd done the right thing, that she was proud of me for standing firm. I felt liberated, honestly, like I'd taken a huge weight off my shoulders. That same week, I made the decision to start my own real estate company. I'd been thinking about it for months, but that visit from my parents was the final push I needed. I used our savings. Angela also invested part of her money, and we got a bank loan based on my experience and track record. We rented a small office, nothing fancy but functional. I hired 2 assistants, and I started contacting my old clients and colleagues. Several clients I'd worked with for years at my father's company told me they'd been waiting for me to start something of my own because they didn't want to keep working with Kevin. Some of the agents who had left my father's company contacted me asking if I needed staff. They wanted to work with me. They trusted my leadership and my vision. In 3 months, I already had a team of 10 people, all experienced, all committed to building something new together. My sister Karen found out that several of my father's company's ex-employees had come to work for me, and she sent me an email threatening me with lawsuits for stealing employees and clients. I responded very simply, told her that people had the right to work wherever they wanted, that clients freely chose who to do business with, and that if Dad's company was losing people, it was because Kevin was managing it terribly, not because I was doing anything illegal. She never sued me, obviously, because she had no legal basis. She was just angry because things weren't working out as they'd planned. About a year after starting my company, my parents came again to my new office. I'd already moved operations to a bigger space. We had 12 agents, several big contracts, things were going well. My parents walked in without warning. My assistant tried to stop them, but they just walked past right to my office. My father looked worse than last time. Honestly, he looked like he'd aged 10 years and 12 months. They told me the company was basically bankrupt, that they'd had to sell the building where the offices were to pay debts, that Kevin had finally resigned, admitting he couldn't handle the pressure, that my sister didn't talk to them anymore because she was angry that her son had failed. They asked me again to help them, to forget about the past, to think about the family legacy. I told them there was nothing to do, that the legacy was already destroyed, that they had made their decisions and now had to live with the consequences. My father tried the guilt angle, telling me how could I leave them in ruin being his son, that they had raised and educated me, that I owed them something. I told him the only thing I owed them was exactly the same thing they gave me when I resigned, nothing. Angela came into the office at that moment. She'd come to have lunch with me, and when she saw my parents, she politely asked them to leave. My mother tried to talk to her, telling her that she could understand from a family perspective, but Angela cut her off and told her that precisely because she understood family was why she supported me. Because I was her family now, and I had been treated unfairly. My parents left after that, and that was the last time I talked to them in person. A few more months passed. My father's company ended up closing completely. He sold what was left, and I guess he retired with what he could save. Kevin, from what I hear around, is working at some normal corporate job. Nothing special. I think he finally understood that the business world wasn't for him. My sister Karen apparently is resenting everyone. Me for not helping, my father for ruining her son's opportunity, Kevin for failing. Basically, she's not happy with anyone. Like 2 months ago, I received an email from my father. It was long, like 3 pages, where he basically admitted he'd made a terrible mistake, that he'd let his love for his grandson cloud his judgment, that he'd been unfair to me, that he regretted everything that had happened. He said he understood if I could never forgive him, but that he wanted me to know. He recognized his mistake and that he was proud of what I'd achieved on my own. He ended the email saying he hoped that someday we could talk again, not as boss and employee, Not even about the company, just as father and son. I haven't responded. I don't know if I'm going to respond honestly. Angela tells me I should eventually consider having some kind of relationship with him, that he's my father after all and life is short, but she also respects my decision if I don't want to. I'm still processing everything. There are days when I think maybe in a few years I can forgive but not forget. And there are days when I think it's simply not worth having toxic people in my life, family or not. My company is thriving. We just closed the best quarter since we started. We have contracts with important developers. Our team has grown to 20 people, and the reputation we're building is solid. Angela and I finally decided it's a good time to start trying to have kids. Now that we have financial and emotional stability, I bought a new house last month. Nothing ostentatious, but comfortable and in a good neighborhood. We bought it with money I generated from my own effort, and that feels incredible. Do I miss my family? Sometimes, I guess. I miss what I thought we had. I miss the idea of having a normal relationship with my parents, but I don't miss the pain and resentment I felt when I worked for my father. I don't miss feeling like I was never enough, that there was always someone more important than me. Now I live on my own terms, building something that's truly mine, surrounded by people who value and respect me, and that's worth more than any family business or legacy or whatever my father thought he was protecting. Life goes on, and I'm okay. Better than okay, honestly. I'm at peace with my decisions, and that's what really matters at the end of the day.